Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking at the connection between high intelligence and something called overexcitabilities.
Yeah, so basically the idea of like a really powerful brain, maybe that means a more like reactive body too.
More intense reactions and emotions even.
A sensitive immune system, possibly.
Exactly. And get this, we've got some pretty solid research to dive into.
Yeah, not just like, stories and stuff.
Right, an actual study.
With high IQ folks, Mensa members to be precise.
Oh, wow. So the brainiacs of the brainiacs.
Yep. Plus, we'll look at some articles about giftedness, especially in women, and the unique challenges they often face.
Layering it all up. So let's jump right in with this hyperbrain, hyperbody theory. What is that all about?
Okay, so straight from the research, the idea is that people with super high IQs, they experience the world in a more intense way.
More intense, like how?
Well, mentally and physically.
Okay, so we're talking what? Feeling emotions more deeply, being super sensitive to sights and sounds, even reacting more strongly to, like, allergens?
You're getting it. And the study actually found this could have some pretty serious implications.
Like what?
Higher risk for things like depression, anxiety.
Whoa, wait, just because you have a high IQ?
The study found a link, yeah.
That's kind of scary, honestly. Like, is that a guarantee? If I'm super smart, am I destined for anxiety?
No, not a guarantee at all. It's more like, how do I put it? A predisposition? Not everyone will experience it.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. But help me understand why this might be the case.
So there's this fascinating theory called overexcitabilities, developed by this psychologist, Dabrowski.
Overexcitabilities.
He noticed these 5 key areas where gifted individuals might experience things more intensely.
5 areas, okay. Like what?
So psychomotor, sensory, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional.
And these overexcitabilities, they explain why gifted folks might react more strongly to things.
Exactly, like their nervous system is just more sensitive.
This is starting to sound familiar. It reminds me of some of those articles we have on gifted women.
Yep.
Yeah, they talked about feeling overwhelmed by emotions, constantly wanting to learn, feeling different.
Classic signs of overexcitabilities, those are.
So it's not just about being really smart. It's about this heightened sensitivity across the board.
You got it. And this is where things get really interesting. This intensity can be a superpower, fueling creativity, and a deep hunger for knowledge.
But
Yeah.
there's a flip side, right?
Right. That same intensity can also make you more sensitive to stimuli, more prone to strong emotions.
And potentially misdiagnosed too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with kids. Think of like the psychomotor type.
The what now?
Psychomotor, lots of energy, constant need for stimulation. It can easily be mistaken for ADHD.
Oh, wow. So a kid could be gifted, but instead...
It's slapped with an ADHD label, yeah.
That seems like a recipe for a lot of frustration.
And missed potential for sure.
Okay, so misdiagnosis is a real concern. What else did the study find?
This was a big one, actually. The rate of Asperger's in the Mensa group. Way higher than the national average.
Way higher. How much higher are we talking?
Over 222 times higher, to be exact.
Whoa, okay. That's significant. I always thought high intelligence and Asperger's were totally separate things.
Well, remember, some of those early descriptions of autism did often mention high intelligence as a common trait.
Oh, interesting. So maybe we're rediscovering a link that was observed before, but somehow got lost along the way.
Could be. Which makes you wonder how many people have been misdiagnosed over the years.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about. But hold on, we keep talking about the brain, but what about the body? How does all this hyper stuff actually impact physical health?
That's where things get even more interesting. The study looked at things like allergies, asthma, even autoimmune diseases.
So are you saying that if your brain is always in overdrive, your immune system goes haywire too?
It's a fascinating connection. We know chronic stress is bad for the immune system, right?
Right. Makes it overreact or even attack the body itself.
Exactly. And if you're experiencing the world with that volume turned up all the time, you're basically living in a constant state of stress, even if there's no real danger.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So your body's alarm bells are always going off.
And the cat can lead to all sorts of issues, like the allergies, asthma, and autoimmune stuff we were talking about.
And the Mensa folks in the study had higher rates of all of these, right?
You bet. Significantly higher.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. This hyper-brain, hyper-body thing, it's not just some abstract concept.
It has real, tangible consequences.
Even if you don't happen to be a Mensa member, it's
Right.
like a whole new way of looking at why some people feel things more deeply or react more intensely than others.
Exactly. And it makes you think twice about those quick judgments we often make, you know?
Oh, totally. Like, Maybe someone's not just being too sensitive. They might be wired differently, experiencing the world in a whole other way.
It's all about understanding those nuances, right?
Totally. Okay, so we've got this intriguing theory. We've explored some possible explanations, and it's clear there's a lot more to unpack here. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to make sure we address the specifics. Like you mentioned, the study found differences in specific types of mood disorders and anxiety, right? Can you break that down a bit more for us?
Sure, like with depression, for instance, they saw a stronger connection to bipolar disorder specifically, but not necessarily to other types.
So it's not like every type of depression is linked to this hyperbrain phenomenon.
Right, and that was the case with anxiety too.
Oh, how so?
Well, they found a link to generalized anxiety and OCD, but not so much to social anxiety.
Fascinating. It seems like some mental health challenges are more connected to this dynamic than others. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. There's so much nuance within these categories, and the research is starting to tease those apart.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
And what about the Asperger's finding? Did the study go into detail about specific types or characteristics within that diagnosis?
They did. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Most of the participants on the autism spectrum specifically identified with Asperger's, not classic autism.
Which, again, aligns with what we were talking about earlier. Asperger's often involves high intelligence and those really intense focused interests.
Right. And the researchers actually suggest that what we call Asperger's today might be closer to how autism was originally described by Kanner and Asperger, both of whom noted that connection to high intelligence.
Wow, so maybe it's not just about rediscovering a link, but also recognizing how our understanding of these conditions has evolved over time.
And how those labels we use can really shape our perceptions.
Absolutely. And that evolution is super important because it can completely change how we diagnose and support people who might be struggling.
Couldn't agree more. It's about seeing the whole person, not just the label.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of this study, this whole hyper-brain, hyper-body idea.
Yeah.
But, and I think it's important to acknowledge this, we've really only scratched the surface here, right?
Oh, yeah, just the tip of the iceberg.
And that's where we're headed next, in part 2 of this deep dive. We're going to get into why this connection might exist, looking at the science behind overexcitabilities and how they can impact both mind and body.
We'll also talk about the limitations of this study, what questions we still have.
Love it. But before we move on, I want to hear from you, the listener. What's standing out to you so far? Does any of this resonate with your own experiences or someone you know? We want to hear your thoughts as we continue this exploration together. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll uncover even more fascinating insights. Okay, so we're back, ready to dive even deeper into this whole hyperbrain, hyperbody idea.
You really get into the why behind it all.
Yeah, like what's the science behind all of this? Last time we were starting to see how having a really powerful brain could lead to like a supercharged experience of life.
Right, with all the ups and downs that come with that.
Exactly. So let's unpack that a bit more. You mentioned these 5 areas of overexcitability that Dabrowski identified.
Oh, yeah, those are key.
Remind me what those are again.
So we've got psychomotor, sensory, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional.
And you were saying these aren't always bad things.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can actually be pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they can be huge assets.
How so?
Think about it. Imagine the drive, the passion, the endless curiosity.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
All those groundbreaking artists, the revolutionary thinkers, the people who just push boundaries.
They probably had some serious overexcitabilities going.
Right. It's like that intensity can be a superpower, fueling their creativity, their innovation, their deep hunger for knowledge.
But you're also saying it's not all sunshine and roses.
Unfortunately not.
There's got to be a flip side.
Yeah, that same intensity that can fuel greatness can also make you more sensitive, you know?
More sensitive to stimuli, more prone to those strong emotions.
Exactly. It's like having the volume turned up on all your senses, processing everything more deeply.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does all this intense thinking and feeling translate into the physical stuff, like the allergies, asthma, all that?
That's where this really cool field comes in. It's called psychoneuroimmunology.
Psychoneuro what now?
It's a mouthful, I know. But basically, it's all about the connection between your mind and your immune system.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we know that chronic stress is terrible for your immune system.
Things that go haywire, right?
Exactly. It can make it overreact, attack the body's own tissues, all sorts of things.
So if you're always experiencing the world in this supercharged way, are you basically living in a state of high alert all the time? Like even when there's no real danger.
That's the idea, yeah.
Wow, that's got to take a toll.
It does. It's like your body's alarm bells are constantly going off, even when there's no fire.
And that can lead to all sorts of physical problems.
Like the allergies, asthma, autoimmune diseases we talked about.
And the Mensa folks in the study, they had higher rates of all of these, right?
Yeah, they did. Significantly higher, even after accounting for things like socioeconomic status.
So it's not just that they have better access to healthcare or live in cleaner environments.
Right, there seems to be something more fundamental at play.
Okay, so it's like a risk factor, not a guarantee.
Exactly. Not everyone with a high IQ will experience these things.
Right, right. But knowing this information can definitely help people be more aware, maybe take steps to manage their health better.
For sure. Knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely. But before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. You said the study found differences in the types of mood disorders and anxiety they looked at, right? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, that was really interesting.
Like with depression, I think you said they saw a stronger link to bipolar disorder specifically.
Exactly. Not all types of depression were equally represented.
Interesting. So it seems like certain mental health challenges are more connected to this whole hyperdynamic than others.
It's not just a blanket statement that all high IQ folks are prone to depression.
Right. It's way more nuanced than that.
And that nuance showed up with anxiety, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, the study found a stronger connection to generalized anxiety and OCD.
But not to social anxiety.
Not so much.
That's fascinating. So it really seems like there's a lot of variation within these broader categories.
And the research is just starting to untangle those threads, you know?
Makes sense. Okay, and what about the Asperger's finding? Did they go into detail about different types of Asperger's or specific characteristics?
They did, and this is where it gets even more fascinating. They found that most of the participants who said they were on the autism spectrum identified specifically with Asperger's.
So not classic autism.
Right. Which makes sense considering we've been talking about Asperger's being linked to high intelligence.
Right, and those intense focused interests.
Exactly. And the researchers actually suggest that what we call Asperger's today might actually be closer to the original way autism was described by Kanner and Asper.
The OG autism researchers.
Right. And both of them noted a connection to high intelligence in their descriptions.
So we might not just be rediscovering a link, but also recognizing how our understanding of these conditions has evolved.
It's a good reminder that the labels we use are constantly changing, and we need to stay open to new ways of thinking.
Totally. And that shift in understanding can have a huge impact on how we diagnose and support people.
It's not just about slapping a label on someone.
It's about understanding the whole person, their unique experiences.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about this study, the hyper-brain, hyper-body theory. And it's clear there are lots of different angles to consider here. But before we move on, I think it's important to acknowledge that this study has its limitations, right?
Oh, absolutely. Every study does.
So what are some things we need to keep in mind as we're interpreting these findings?
Well, for one thing, this was a self-reported study, meaning people were just asked if they'd ever been diagnosed with these conditions.
So there's always the chance of people misremembering or not disclosing everything.
All right. Exactly. It's not the most precise method.
And the study focused specifically on Mensa members, which is a pretty unique group of people.
Right. Not your average folks.
So we can't assume that these findings apply to everyone with high intelligence.
We need more research with different groups.
Like what?
Imagine doing a similar study with students at top universities.
Or people in professions known for being really mentally demanding.
Like scientists, engineers.
Right. That would give us a much more well-rounded picture.
And who knows what other insights we might find.
That's what I love about this kind of research. It always leads to more questions.
Definitely. And speaking of questions, what about the other side of the coin?
The what?
We've talked about the potential downsides of overexcitabilities.
Right, the anxiety, the immune stuff.
What about the potential benefits?
Oh, good point. We touched on the connection to creativity and innovation earlier.
Right. What if we could find ways to help people harness those intense experiences, channel them into positive outcomes?
That would be amazing, turning those challenges into strengths.
Exactly. And there's another avenue of research the study authors mentioned that I think is super cool.
Oh.
Using animal models.
Wait, are we talking about those super smart mice I heard about? The ones scientists basically turned into, like, tiny Einsteins?
Yep, those doogie mice, as they're sometimes called.
Seriously, studying them could actually tell us something about human intelligence.
It might sound strange, but those mice could actually provide valuable insights into the biological mechanisms behind overexcitabilities.
So we could actually observe how these hyperbrains work differently at a cellular level.
And potentially uncover new ways to treat conditions like mood disorders or autoimmune diseases.
Now, that would be a game changer. It's amazing to think that research on intelligence could have such far-reaching implications.
And not just for people with super high IQs, but for everyone.
It's like we're all interconnected, and these discoveries can ripple outwards, benefiting everyone.
It's a pretty powerful thought, isn't it? But even without those future discoveries, I think this deep dive has already given us a lot to think about.
For sure. What are some key takeaways that have stuck with you so far?
Well, for me, it's that reminder that high intelligence isn't always easy.
It comes with its own unique set of challenges and sensitivities.
And recognizing those challenges is so important for supporting gifted individuals.
Whether it's through education, therapy, or just creating a more understanding environment.
Absolutely.
And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is that overexcitabilities are something we all experience to some degree.
We all have those dials turned up a little bit in different ways.
It's just that some people have them cranked up higher than others.
And that's okay. It's part of what makes us unique.
This knowledge can help us understand ourselves better, and it can help us be more compassionate towards others.
For sure. Maybe someone's not just too sensitive. Maybe they're just wired differently.
And that different wiring can actually be a beautiful thing.
I love that.
Me too. Okay, so where do we go from here? We've talked about the research, the potential implications, the limitations. What's next? Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into high intelligence and overexcitabilities.
It's been quite a journey so far.
It really has. We've uncovered some really fascinating research, explored the potential downsides, the upsides.
And even touched on those ethical questions around labeling and diagnosis.
Right. But like any good deep dive, we've also come up with way more questions than answers.
I guess that's how it always goes, though, right?
True. Every discovery just seems to lead to more mysteries.
And more things to explore.
Exactly. Speaking of exploring, one of the things that really stuck with me from the study is that we need to do more research beyond just Mensa.
Oh, I totally agree. Like, what if we looked at students at top universities?
Or people in those really intellectually demanding jobs.
Scientists, engineers, yeah. Would we see the same patterns of overexcitabilities, the same health outcomes?
Right. It would be fascinating to see how this hyper-brain, hyper-body thing plays out in different settings.
And maybe we could even find some protective factors.
Like maybe certain environments or support systems could actually help people deal with those challenges.
Right. And on the flip side, maybe we could figure out how to harness those intense experiences.
Oh, yeah. Turn those challenges into strengths.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about those genetically engineered mice? The ones with those supercharged brains?
The Doogie mice.
Oh, yeah.
I think studying them could be really helpful.
Seriously. How so?
We could actually see how those hyperbrains work differently at a cellular level.
Wow, that's mind-blowing.
It could lead to breakthroughs in treating all sorts of conditions.
Mood disorders, autoimmune diseases.
Maybe even things we haven't even thought of yet.
It's incredible to think that research on high intelligence, even in mice, could have such a huge impact on humans.
And not just for these super smart people, but for everyone.
Exactly. We're all connected, and these discoveries can benefit all of us. It's like we're all part of this big web of life.
So true. But even without all those future discoveries, I think we can already take away some important lessons from this deep dive.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that have really stood out to you, listener? For me, it's the realization that high intelligence isn't always easy.
It's not all sunshine and roses, for sure.
It can be a real challenge, and we need to recognize that.
We need to support those gifted individuals, provide the right kind of help.
Whether it's through education, therapy, or just creating a more understanding and accepting environment.
I couldn't agree more. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is just that overexcitabilities are part of the human experience.
We all experience them to some degree.
Some of us just have those dials turned up higher than others.
But that doesn't mean anything is wrong with us.
It's just part of what makes us unique.
I love that. And this knowledge can help us understand ourselves better, be more compassionate towards others.
Maybe someone isn't being too sensitive. Maybe they're just experiencing the world more intensely.
Right. And that intensity can actually be a beautiful thing.
It really can. It's what drives so much creativity, innovation, passion.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we really encourage you to take some time to think about what you've learned.
How does this new knowledge connect with your own experiences?
What new perspectives have you gained? And if you're feeling inspired, there's a whole world of information out there waiting to be explored.
Dive deeper into the research on giftedness, explore those overexcitabilities.
See where this journey of self-discovery takes you.
We've just scratched the surface here.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
We hope it's sparked your curiosity, broadened your understanding.
And maybe even left you with a sense of wonder about how amazing the human experience truly is.
Until next time, keep exploring.